got two special guests joining us for our entertainment segment as we talk about the Harare Open Book Festival. It's on this weekend and it's running under the theme Necessary Conversations. And I guess maybe we'll start here with a very necessary conversation about the book festival. And we're joined in studio by Brain Garusa as well as Sister Azai. Sister Azai, good morning and thank you for joining us on Morning Rush.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Great. Brian, thank you for joining us. We're really excited about the Harare Book Festival. Let's start right at the top. Necessary Conversations. What is that theme about and why that theme?
Okay, thank you for having us. So, Necessary Conversation is just an idea that came to us as creatives, and we started to think around issues that are affecting writers, that are affecting artists. So we just thought we should discuss about these issues as well as issues affecting our communities. And sometimes Necessary Conversations is all about celebrating who we are, what we have, what we are doing. So that's basically what we'll be doing tomorrow.
And obviously these necessary conversations, how significant, what role do they play in terms of maybe connecting creatives, writers, authors with their audience in line with what you guys are trying to do with the Harare Open Book Festival?
Yeah, so one of the reasons why we created Harare Open Book Festival is to connect all stakeholders that are concerned, that are passionate about books, about arts, who include writers, readers, publishers, booksellers, and anyone you can think of. So it is important because it is a platform where they get to see each other, they get to celebrate each other, they get to love each other, they get to discuss what they've been doing and what they've been reading from all corners of the world.
Right, I understand that there's a rich list of speakers that are lined up for this particular festival. Alan Chirundamoyo, among those, maybe just tell us about him and the other guys that might be more popular that we expect to be interacting with the public and with other creatives at the book festival.
Yeah, it was also part of the way we curated it. We wanted to showcase the diversity that we have in the Zimbabwean literary space. So, as you mentioned, Aaron Chirundamoyo is one of the legends. He has been there even before we got our independence. So, when we incorporated giants like Aaron Chirundamoyo, we were safeguarding ourselves from forgetting what these literary giants have done. We also incorporated young writers who are locally based. We also incorporated writers that are based abroad so that we can come together and celebrate who we are.
So the Harare Open Book Festival on this weekend, running under the theme Necessary Conversations. And one of the writers who's going to be there is Sister Zai. She is based in Australia. I understand you're here for the festival. It is your first time taking part in the festival. I mean, how important is it for you? I mean, we just had Brain there talking about that diversity from legends to writers that are based not only here in Zimbabwe but across the world. As somebody who's been living in Australia and was also in that industry, how important is it for you to have a festival like this, the Harare Open Book Festival?
It's extremely important to be able to connect back to the roots, at all times, I feel, as a writer. So I'm based in Melbourne, which is a UNESCO City of Literature. And so a lot of my work there has been about creating platforms for African writers from across the continent. And so being able to come back to my own roots and then connect with folks here and, as Brain has just said, to connect with the legends, the people who were writing before we got our independence is very, very important. It's easy to forget sometimes that your writing does have an origin story,
Yeah.
And so it's very important to come back and I do like to come back quite regularly to connect, but this is my first time at the Open Book Festival.
All right, I understand you were born here, you've been living in Australia. How has that influenced your writing? You talked about living in Melbourne and obviously having those roots of having grown up here in Zimbabwe. How does that intersect?
It intersects quite beautifully, actually. So I live on the lands of the Kulin Nation. So specifically the language groups that were there before Australian colonization were the Bunwurrung and the Wurundjeri. And so I found that I'm doing my PhD at the moment, and so my PhD is about that intersection of black writing in Australia, and so from the African diaspora, but also from the indigenous folks of Australia. So there is a very beautiful intersection. They have very similar customs as well. So things like totem are very similar to them. They're very earth-based as well. The lands that I'm on, the folks there are known as the water people, and you know how we love water in Zim.
We do.
So there are a lot of parallels. I find a lot of parallels for my writing. Yeah.
But, and obviously just looking, what are you hoping then to draw from your experience at this year's Harare Open Book Festival, given some of the legends who are going to be there and the diversity of writers that you can connect with and maybe continue feeding into, not just your current work, but even into your PhD thesis?
So, this is always tricky, I feel, because, when you're coming from overseas, sometimes you can feel like you know more, you have more to offer. But I think for me, it's always about being still and listening, and then absorbing the information and the frameworks, the themes, the topics that are of interest to people who are here, and then reflecting on that and seeing how it intersects with what I'm doing. So instead of like imposing an agenda, being open to the agenda that's being offered here. So I'm all ears.
All right. Oh, yes. Necessary conversations. That's the theme for this year's Harare Open Book Festival. Brain, I'll come back to you. Obviously, there seems to be a diversity of creatives who are going to be taking part in this. As organizers, as people who are, working behind the scenes to make sure that we bring this diversity into one area. How important is it for you to have people not just here in Zimbabwe, but coming through, we've got roots here, coming through and wanting to be a part of the festival like Sisters are here?
Yeah, I think it's important to have all groups represented. I think those who have gone outside, they also help us with new experiences of what they've experienced. As you have just heard, Sisters are working, the work she is doing with other communities that are probably underlined, and so it's important also we are also there to learn as curators, as people who are working behind the scenes. We want all the information and all the knowledge that comes from here and that comes from anywhere else in the world.
And then speaking about this specific, let's go into the details. I'm sure now we've had the necessary conversation around what it's about, what you guys are trying to achieve. Like I'm thinking now, I want to come and experience this. 3 years ago, I used to dabble in some writing. I started doing more of talking. I came on TV. But if somebody's now interested in coming and attending the festival, taking part in the festival, let's talk about that. Where is this festival happening? When, are we getting charged? What are the expectations? What do you want us to come with when we do come to the festival this weekend?
Actually, it's a crusade of those who have been converted, those who have backslided, like what you are saying, what you are telling us. So we are part and parcel of the target. We need anyone who is interested in the books. Writers, readers, those who have been writing. You might find yourself rejuvenated. It's happening at 15 Yoko Avenue in Newlands, starting from 9 up until 5. We have a whole range of panels, we have a Legends Hour where we'll be speaking to Aaron Chundramoe. We have discussions on how literature informs the psyche behind seat making. We have topics on love and literature and how it informs us that. We also have how other people encountered us, even from outside our borders, through literature, because I think stories is part and part. They can be used to sell a country, to sell who we are. So it's a whole lot. There is also poetry, there is also music. So we are trying to gel with other artistic platforms.
Right. Sisters, I'll come back to you. Looking at maybe just the state of books and reading just globally, there seems to be a trend now where people seem to be reading less, spending more time maybe on TikTok, on YouTube. There's so much different stimuli, or people are reading maybe blogs or things like that. In terms of maybe the traditional book space, and whether it's the hard copy or you're getting your Kindle or whatever, how would you compare where we are as Zimbabweans in terms of our reading culture and what you've experienced living outside Zimbabwe?
That's a very difficult question for me to answer because, I need to spend more time to be able to answer like a comparison question like that. But I think that sometimes we overestimate or underestimate how much people are still reading, because there is an entire trend on TikTok where people review books.
Oh, wow.
So you can
I'm on the wrong
use
TikTok there. Need to change the algorithm.
So there is that,
Yeah.
and there are a lot of people who are passionate about African literature as well. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm very excited to connect with folks like Brain, because they are about giving a platform to African writers and African writing. So I find that it's challenging, even in Africa, to find books by African authors.
Yeah.
And so when I return, I'm usually trying to find books by African authors.
Yeah.
And overseas, you usually get the same names.
The traditional name, like the Chinua Achebes, the giants.
The giants, the giants,
Yeah.
but there's a wealth of gifted writers and storytellers out there as well. And it's often when I come back and connect with people like Brain, who their whole focus in life, their mission is to give a platform to those, poets. Like, he recently sold me a book by Tariro Ndoro. So I'm reading Agringada, which is amazing. It's an amazing work of poetry, collection of poetry. Very inspirational.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Brent, coming back to you, obviously, she's speaking about the significance of the Harare Open Book Festival in terms of providing a platform. As somebody who works on the ground in the industry, are you happy with where we are as Zimbabweans in terms of our reading culture? How we engage with the creators, whether it's the authors, the publishers, and what are some of the things you would like to see us sort of get better on, in terms of what you can probably extract from the festival and maybe put into the mainstream?
So, one thing I can assure you, like what Sister Zaya said, there are people who are passionate about African literature, about Zimbabwean literature. They are interested in reading their own. And I'm happy because that generation is almost young like us. They made a conscious decision to look for African writers, for Zimbabwean writers, for black writers. But one thing that worries us is, of course, the copyright issues. We have the streets infested with photocopies of books. It's really worrying, especially for the creatives. Because you are not paying for their hard labor, because they spend hours, they spend even money, they spend their time creating these works. It is good. It will be good if people will buy books, even if you are buying from digital platforms. So
that we can support and continue growing.
So that's part and parcel of the necessary conversations. And so to discuss how the issue is being affected by technology and new
and how to even embrace it and make sure that we can capacitate each other. So necessary conversations. That's the theme for this year's Harare Open Book Festival happening in Newlands this weekend, and there are lots of authors and just different stakeholders in the publishing sector will be there. So make sure you can make your way there as well. Sister Zaya, before we go, maybe just a quick word of encouragement to somebody who's out there, who's interested in African literature, who's interested in just connecting with different creatives who've got a connection to this country. Your word of encouragement before we call it a morning.
Well, when I started, people thought that I was a bit crazy, just focusing on African literature. And I got a lot of pushback. Why aren't you focusing on the classics? Why aren't you focusing on the canon, which is generally your European authors, which is great. I did all of that in high school. And so, your avenue and your pathway in writing does not necessarily have to be through a degree. I'm doing my PhD, but it's not my background. Creative writing is not my background. I'm a street poet who ended up in a higher institution of learning, focusing on creative writing on the basis of the work that I have done and a commitment and a passion that I have to black writing. So just do your thing.
All right. And Brian, just one final word. Just give us the location once again and how we can get to the Harare Open Book Festival this weekend. 50
New York Avenue in Newlands is just a few meters, I think 400-500 meters from Newlands shops. It's happening tomorrow from 9 o'clock till 5 o'clock. you can come anytime you want. And you can be locked inside the gates and you have an enjoyable time.
Yeah, I think I'll definitely pencil that in. Maybe I can reignite the struggling author in me. But yeah.
Konapo Ipapo ba ZTN Prime, DSTV channel 294, the place to be.